Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First of all, congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
I loved your speech last night about talking about why would anyone make an independent film. Before you even started, was that immediately what you were deciding that you had to go the independent way for making this?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that it's a horror film that doesn't sort of behave like a horror film, and I think that the expectation with horror movies these days is that they're big, high concept, highly recognizable. I mean, I don't want to say derivative because there's lots of good ones, but I think that there is a sort of that again quality of horror films. And so the response that I got from the industry with this script was, oh, what a great script, but we could never make it. Because it's just sort of challenging in the way that the narrative unfurls itself, and it's sort of humanistically sad in a weird way. And so, studios I met with, and they were all fans, but it was very much sort of the do us a favor and write something really simple next time.
So what got you into making the film in the first place? Because obviously you had a career before this as an actor. So what made you say, I need to make this film?
Writing and directing films was what I wanted to do when I was a child, and just sort of life had its way of keeping me from that. And my brief stint as an actor kind of was not something that I took very seriously, not something I thought I was especially good at, and I couldn't be more relieved to be done with. So after sort of having a very unsatisfying run as a not a very satisfying actor, I got back to what I wanted to be doing, which was creating worlds and writing screenplays and directing movies. So co-wrote a few movies with a few people, and then sort of just figured it was time to write my own thing, and then just sat down and said, what's a movie that I want to see? What kind of movie do I love? What's going to move me?
And I mean, for some first-time directors, I would think that horror, and especially a very avant-garde horror, might actually be, excuse the pun, but too scary to dive into. So, what made you say, no, this is a story I've got to tell?
I felt like the movies that I responded to the most were movies like The Shining and Carrie and Rosemary's Baby and Let the Right One In and Don't Look Now. And those are the movies that when I watched them, I wished I had made them. I felt because what horror movies can be at their best are very stylish, very chancy, very emotional, and they deal with what's hidden. They deal with what we don't know. They deal with what we don't see. And so I think that as long as you're approaching that from an honest place of, I don't know the answer to everything. There's a lot of darkness, and there's a lot of elements of darkness in the world that we can't quite see past. I think when you keep that in your mind at all times, and that's how you sort of design the experience of your movie, there's a lot of latitude in that.
Right. And to some degree, from what I saw, I mean, and this is maybe the strongest horror films that we know of, maybe we don't see a lot of the worst elements. Some of the scariest stuff is left almost to the imagination. It seemed like you were going for that. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that I wanted to stay away from brutality. Brutality in movies doesn't really work for me, and that's not to say there aren't some brutal moments in February, because there are. There are a couple of pieces that I think people watch and it's hard to experience, but I wanted to make those as sort of earned as possible, and as few as possible. Just to if the experience is one of sadness and grief, and then I wanted the moments that caused those sadness and grief, the death of a certain character, that to be really impactful once, as opposed to wall-to-wall brutality.
And it felt, I mean, even some of the harshest scenes felt heartbreaking to me watching them. So
well, that's the idea. It's like when one of the girls is murdered, and her death really is sort of the emotional center of the movie. It's kind of what I'm saying. It's like if the whole movie had been brutal, and then that had been brutal, then nothing's brutal. But the fact that I sort of withheld brutality until the death that's the most heartbreaking is also the most difficult to watch. To me, that just makes sense.
Yeah. And then in terms of, you had location, there's been lot said about the fact that you shot near Ottawa, which
Yep.
doesn't get a lot of opportunity for films.
No,
Really.
it doesn't.
So what? I mean, obviously, tone, the location must have been a huge part. Was that it, or what was the
You know,
location like for you?
the location just sort of ended up being perfect. We looked in Winnipeg, we looked in Vancouver, and we found in Ottawa not only a perfect agricultural college that was almost empty and only had a few classes they were still hosting, so we really had a run of the place for the most part.
Wow.
So not only did we find that with all the snow, with the extreme bitter cold, but the willingness of the people of Ottawa, not at all, very sort of not entitled, very happy to have us,
Right.
very hospitable, very much wanting us to come and make their houses bloody, very much wanting us to come and do what we did. And really, everybody worked so hard. I was really humbled by it.
That's cool. Yeah, you don't hear about that in every location.
Cities that become
Scattered.
sort of used to film production, it's like, the most obvious is working in Los Angeles, where you get the feeling that like a lot of the time nobody gives a shit.
Right.
Yeah.
So then, your casting. What were some of the decisions that went into who you wanted to cast for which parts?
It became about, we really want to be able to get someone who's going to attract audiences to what we're doing. You have to have eyes on your movie for it to be worth anything, otherwise you're just showing pictures in the dark.
Right.
And so we were able to get the script to Emma Roberts, who obviously has a following and is just sort of making her way into the horror genre as sort of a scream queen. I mean, to quote the title of her new TV show, which I can't believe I just did, but there it is. So she got the script and responded so nicely, so right away. And I had one telephone conversation with her, and it was sort of done. And from there, then she said, "What about Kieran and Shipka?" And I said, I didn't know I could think that way. I didn't know that was going to be an option to me. So the script got to Kieran, and a couple of days later, she read it and she said, "Absolutely yes." And then Lucy, we found. I saw 200 people probably for Rose, tapes from everywhere, and people came in, and Lucy made a tape at home in London and sent it to us, and it was the kind of thing where I had seen 100, 200 people, and then I saw Rose, and I saw the right person.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was.
So in the end, did the final filming, when you got to the end, were you like, that was exactly what I wanted?
Not at all.
Surprises?
Not at all. In fact, I got to the end and I thought, this is a disaster.
Really?
Yeah, and then you get to the first week of editing and you look at everything that you have. I mean, I had seen dailies, but I had not really looked at dailies very much. I had not really looked at every day's work because there was nothing I could do about most of it. On a 24-day shoot schedule, where you're overwhelmed by cold and other technical things and not enough money, not enough time, you're not looking at dailies and saying, oh, I'll go back and redo that.
Right.
It's done. So I was just trying to kind of keep the train going and not get fired, you know what I mean? Like not lose my days.
Right.
So when I got to the editing room back in Los Angeles and started to look at what I had, it was really difficult. It's really, for a first timer, it's really difficult to see the movie without proper sound, without proper color timing, without sort of the connective tissue that we take for granted when we see a movie. And honestly, it wasn't until a month ago when I did the final sound mix in Toronto with fantastic sound mixers, fantastic sound department, and added my brother's score to it, and finally saw it in proper color with the color timed and everything, that I finally said, all right, fine, it's going to be okay. But no, the whole time I dreaded looking at it. Yeah.
Oh, that's a terrible feeling.
Tell me about it.
Wow. Well, I mean, you've come to the other side.
Yep.
You just had your premiere.
Yep.
How do you feel about how it went? It seemed like the crowd responded very well.
I always knew and still know that it's a not for everybody movie. And I guess there aren't really any for everybody movies.
No.
But this one is sort of chancy in its own way, very dark in its own way, deliberate in its own way, and I think that enough people responded to it really positively to make me feel okay.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I mean, I really enjoyed seeing it last
Thank
night.
you.
So Congratulations and
Thanks.
good luck going forward.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.